And the funny thing is, most people are concerned about the electoral finance bill, which is actually going to do the same. They're going to prevent. That's the thing. The two bills are pulling in two different directions, but the right are making out. Ironically, the right are claiming they're both pulling in the same direction. That's right. Yep. Absolutely. Don't disagree with you. Uah! Up the revolution. We're sitting in a cafe, we're better. That's a big orange thing.
Yeah, it's also comes in
That's
red.
a bit dodgy, to be honest, bro.
If you don't like it, I got this one. That looks like one of the Queen's British Guards, you know?
It does. It looks like something else as well, but I won't say that.
Well, it looks like a penis, but yeah, that's okay.
A very short one.
Let me just check the gain. Okay, that's the backup audio, yada yada yada. Okay. So
I'm going to continue to ask you questions first.
well, I mean, we're waiting for pizza. What were you talking about, like, right now with the, oh yeah, so you were stamping people with the terrorists.
With a George Bush mask on.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something I came up with. It was a funny little thing, because I had already decided I was going to go to the protest and stamp people, and that morning I found a George Bush mask in a shop, so I thought the two things would go together well. And it went down very well. Very, very well.
And you managed to stamp Nandor.
Yeah, Nandor's a good mate of mine.
Right, and right before we happened to interview him, we literally I accosted him. I mean, like, he was giving a speech, and there was like any questions. There were no questions, so I walked up.
Yeah.
I said, "Could I get an interview with you after this rally?" And he said, "Anybody else want an interview?" You know, so.
Yeah, well, that's good. He hadn't washed by the time you saw him. He was in a different town.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, I mean, I still try to responsible for a fairly large amount of what the Greens do theatrically. But having said that, I mean, you know, the Greens are actually in the business of trying to get votes, which the McGillicuddys weren't. So I tend to be a little bit more careful. I mean, the McGillicuddys did things that were deliberately designed to get at people's noses, which is not a good look for a party that's actually wanting people to vote for them. So the stuff I do for the Greens is still theatrical, but much more moderate. Much more moderate. And having said that, running around stamping people with terrorists, I didn't do that as a Green Party person. I did it as a solo performer lunatic, you know. Nandor was there doing the Green Party stuff, so I didn't have to front. So what do you think is going to happen with the Uruguay stuff? On the level of the big bill, on the level of the law itself, the law is going to come in. We can continue to protest, but it's going to come in, and maybe somewhere down the track we'll get a chance to repeal it or something, but it's really hard to imagine given that Labour and National actually agree on it. In terms of what's going to happen with the case itself, I think it's going to go on for bloody years, and I think they're going to have a lot of trouble making anything stick, because half the evidence they collected has been ruled out because they collected it under the Terrorism Suppression Act rather than the Arms Act. I think the funniest thing about it is that the anarchist movement, who I know a lot of, were pretty irrelevant, really. I mean, I respect their politics, but they were pretty irrelevant, but they've been made extremely relevant by events, and so... Sorry, my phone's ringing again. Here comes Graham.
Not a problem.
Hi, sorry Graham, I didn't get back to you. Yeah, in terms of, your preference would be to meet outside of town, obviously. Well, I mean... Yeah, the thing is, Brian's on foot, so whatever happens, it's possibly easier for you to come, and he doesn't know his way around, so I mean, it's still going to be a whole lot easier for, because he's already interviewing me. Yeah. In fact, the camera's rolling and he's pointing it at me right now. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, tell me where you want to park in town, and I'll bring him to somewhere nearby. No, but it looks like it's going to. Yeah. We're down by La Commune by Riffraff, which is why he was going to finish off the interview by Riffraff as a sort of a postscript to the whole thing. Another option might be Garden Place. I mean, you could park in the underground car park at the back and then meet you in Garden Place, and then you've got that as a location to describe things that have happened there. Because I've just been explaining to him about your public humiliation, and that was the end of the party, and that's all attempts to resurrect since will not be countenanced. That's the best thing I can suggest. Okay. Okay, I'll bring him down there. Okay, what time are you going to be at the Meteor car park? "3:30 at the Meteor car park." Okay. Yeah, I reckon. Hold on a sec. Half an hour at 3:30, just down there.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. Okay, that'll do. Yep. Okay, see you then. Cheers. Bye.
Okay.
Okay, there's somewhere he can easily park down there, and he's running around doing a whole bunch of things.
There's also the what's it? The we got to go back and do a lot of the things you've already told me. So
yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So start at the beginning.
Yeah.
What do you want to know?
Well, start at the beginning. How did McGillicuddy get started?
The clan McGillicuddy, the entity that it still exists, which is a social entity more than anything else, apparently first came into existence in the house that I now live in, ironically enough, coincidentally, over on Heafy Terrace, about 1977. Graham Cairns was there, and a chap called Jeff Duckett said they were living together as a bit of a family, but probably as a flat, and they said, one day Jeff Duckett said, we're a family, we should call ourselves the McGillicuddys. And that was literally the genesis point. His lunch.
Okay.
Yep, cheers, thank you.
Thanks.
It was for the next few years they were just a bunch of lads and ladesses who were running around doing odd things for their own amusement. In about 1980, a guy called, the guy I mentioned already, Cecil Godfrey Murgatroyd, turned up in Hamilton, and he was an acolyte of a guy called the Wizard, who still operates out of Christchurch as a kind of public speaker and general all-round phenomena. And he was doing a whole lot of theatrical weird shit. I mean, in those days we didn't even see it as art. I mean, nobody really did. It was just dressing up and doing daft stuff. And and Murgatroyd was an acolyte of the Wizards, and the Wizards' mythology is British imperialism, and the McGillicuddys naturally reacted against that. We weren't really into that, so our mythology became Scottish Jacobism, largely as a reaction to the Wizards' British imperialism. But Murgatroyd sort of showed the McGillicuddys who were here that they could go public, and because Murgatroyd used to speak in Garden Place every day, he was really hated. Lots of people really wanted to kill him, and this is in 1980, and so he kind of showed the McGillicuddys that they could go public, and so they sort of set themselves up as a kind of another parallel but quite different phenomena to what the Wizard was doing. And then in 83, and they were doing pacifist battles, which are kind of, it's not really hard to explain really. They're sort of a piss take of warfare, but they're probably the closest, and really basically fighting in costumes, this is what we're going to do in Oamaru next week for the first time in a few years, is basically suspending reality through great big running around theatrical game, really. That was what was holding a lot of what the Wizard was doing together, and we were reacting to him. And then in '83, Graham ran for mayor of Hamilton, and running for public office was something that as I say, the Wizard had done, but he'd only ever done it on a small scale. He only ever had like two or three candidates. Graham ran in '83 as for mayor, and then the next following year he formed the McGillicuddy Serious Party. That year he only had 3 candidates that were all around here, and then about that time I was in Wellington, and I became aware of it. I was quite young, I was only about 18, and Graham would have been in his mid-20s at this stage. And so in '84 I was sort of aware of the McGillicuddys but hadn't really got into it. And then so I got started on doing McGillicuddy things, doing theatrical stuff in Wellington, street theatre and the like. And then in '87, in the '87 election, we had about we had 19 candidates who were mostly either here or Wellington. Should we move over there? With only a couple of people elsewhere. So in '87, in '87 it was sort of a 2-centre phenomena. Now I'm talking to just the camera while he gets his bag. Here he comes. Yeah, '87 it was basically a 2-person phenomena, a 2-centre phenomena. At that point I decided that I really wanted. I'm still getting wet. Stop raining! Okay, let's move. Oh, we may have to move inside. Okay. Hey, you mind if we just do a little interview in here? Yeah, no, we're getting wet outside. That's true. No worries, guys.
And yet oddly appropriate.
Yeah, so as I was saying, I think you've got water on your lens.
Hold on.
No filming of eating, please. First rule for politicians.
Tell you what, I'm going to have to refocus anyway.
That's alright. I can start again from the beginning if you like.
No, we're good.
So, where were we?
1987.
1987, the McGillicuddy Serious Party had 19 candidates, which was the most. I mean, that immediately put it into a different league because the Wizard Party had never really had more than a few. But it was mainly a Hamilton and Wellington phenomena.
Hold on 1 second. All right. We are finally not going to get interrupted by the rain, not going to get interrupted by anything. We are ready for this interview.
You ready? You sure you're ready? Shall I start at the beginning again?
No, we're good.
Okay.
So 1987.
Yeah, 1987, it was a 2-centre phenomena mostly, and that most of the people who were running were either here or in Wellington. And then I moved up here because this is where McGillicuddy was happening, and I'm still here. And I guess the partnership, such as it was Graham as the leader, as the public face, and the sort of all-round big personality, and me in the background doing the work. Look, I've got someone with a camera. Another man with a camera. There's a man with a camera. He usually has a camera with him. So in 1990 we basically jumped up to having 60 candidates, and this was before MMP, so we had 99 odd seats. And so 1990 and 1993 was when we had 60 odd candidates. It was really when it was really running full bore, and so we had most of the country covered. We set ourselves the goal of having a candidate in every seat, which we never quite managed. But the point was, as I was saying to you before, that before MMP, you didn't have to register to be a political party. You could just say you were. And so, at that point, I guess the full ticket, the idea of having a candidate in every seat, was the sort of measure of intent, of seriousness of intent. And a lot of what we were doing was very much trying to tick all the boxes in terms of seriousness of intent, like, you know, jumping over all the hurdles that officialdom would put in our way, but still being as wacky and zany as we could get away with in terms of what we're actually doing. And so, and 93 was really the height of the whole thing, because we had 60 candidates. We managed to convince the Broadcasting Standards Authority that they should give us some money, some of the state funding for political ads. So we made TV ads funded by the taxpayer, and that was also the year we started getting arrested, because we did a piece of street theatre down here where we had some boys pretending to have their dicks chopped off as part of a launch for a candidate called the Bitch Goddess of Hamilton East. And that was a point whereas we had a central concept that we sort of shipped out called the Great Leap Backwards, which was in the manifesto. At the same time, we were also encouraging our candidates to come up with their own concepts and to do theatrically interesting things. Effectively, the manifesto was just a manual for people that couldn't think of their own thing to do. And so 93, there was a lot of people doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Each electorate had its own story, its own characters, its own craziness going on. And 96, so then they said, and then it came along that if MMP was going to require you to register if you're going to use your name at all, we assumed that they'd go down the track of Australia and you'd have to be registered. As it turned out, subsequently, you needed to register to have a party list, but if you didn't register, you could still use the name running for an electorate, but we didn't realise that. So we went through all the hassle of registering, and so that we could have a party list. And then in 96, when we ran, as part of the joke, Graham, as the party leader, was last on the list. All the other parties had their first, they had their leader at the front. I went at the top of the list that year simply because it was felt that I'd done the work to get us the list, and it was appropriate recognition of having been the one that organised it. I think we also kind of vaguely thought perhaps we had some hope in hell of getting in, because you only needed to get 5%, and we'd been getting 1%, so we were deluding ourselves, of course, because we did things like, that time around, we had things like a legislative program. We put up a whole bunch of specifically things that were still mad, but were mad but grounded in this world rather than one of our own construction. And it was stuff like, personal favourites like, compulsory vasectomies for all-boy races, that sort of thing. And that was also some of our best policies were about them. I mean, you said you talked to Winston Peters. We had a policy of deporting all New Zealand First supporters, and because that was when he started talking about immigrants and getting sort of reasonably fascist, so we hit him with that. Likewise, it was 10 years since homosexuality had been legalised, so we called for a quota, which we originally intended as a piss take of leftists called a quotaism, and said we wanted a third of the population to be homosexual as a population control measure, and that went down. The gay community loved that. There was a lot of talk about tactical voting, so we got into tactless voting, which was to do with the idea that if we could get enough people to... these were all things that were responding to MMP specifically. We were trying to get the idea that because you don't get into Parliament if you get less than 5%, if you could break the vote up into 21, spread it between 21 parties, then nobody would get into Parliament if nobody got over 5%. So we were pushing for that. We did a bunch of stuff. The work to fund ratio had dipped such that I wasn't prepared to do it again. By that stage I was a solo parent, and I still am, and and nobody else picked up the reins. So it's sort of, by the time '99 rolled round, it was pretty obvious that that we weren't going to bother anymore. So we sort of went through the motions in '99, and then put most of our energy actually into the grand execution of the party at the end, which we claimed it. By that stage, we were claiming it had been a millennial movement. That was the thing, you know, that it had been building up to the turn of the century, and that was why it had crashed and burned, because Prince Jeffrey hadn't come, you know, as our saviour. And so the narrative of the story tied it up very nicely. Like, you know, a month before the turn of the century, we killed the party. And as I say, the McGillicuddies continue. The jig on Sunday happens every year. We're about to do our biannual extreme picnic, which usually gets some publicity wherever we do it, which is usually in the South Island. There's a riff-raff down here, which was my one post-McGillicuddy project. The Free Lunch Street Theatre Company is another. The Jester House, just out of Nelson, is a totally McGillicuddy environment, run by Grogan. There's all manner of things, all bits and pieces that people are still doing. The clan is still, we still talk, I mean, the irony you talked to me about the Greens, I mean, actually just before I saw you, I've got an ongoing argument with one of the major McGillicuddies who some of us have been trying to talk into joining the Green Party, and he's not going to join the Green Party, not because he's an anarchist, because he is, but because he's a scientist. And so ironically, and this is the thing, I mean, some of us landed up in the Green Party, but not many. I did, Materia did, but probably more McGillicuddies have joined. Because I'm now running a job where I'm now employed by the party and I'm running the whole deal. Ironically enough, my years of running the McGillicuddies turned out to be an employment, a matter of employability years later, because I've already built a political party, so now I'm building one for real. But it's only been since I've been in that job that some of the people I know have even joined, really up until, I mean, and in terms of people who are really active in the McGillicuddies, who are really active in the Greens, is really only me and Matt. We're the only two that's crossed over completely. And there's still a very, I mean, there's a whole bunch of people who are anarchists who wouldn't join any political party other than the McGillicuddies. There's a lot of people whose politics, who are apolitical effectively. What they were attracted to in the McGillicuddies was a chance to take the piss out of politicians. They didn't really have any particular ideology. And those people have disappeared off in all sorts of directions. Some of them have landed up in Britain and America in the reenactment scene. Society of Creative Anachronism and Sealed Knot and all those sort of things. Anything that involved putting on a costume and doing something daft. I mean, that's really what appealed to them. I mean, even in terms of what I was doing, there was always a tension between the theatre side and the activism side. And for the first few years after the political part, McGillicuddy Serious Party had wound up, I put most of my energy into theatre. I only really got involved in the Greens about 3-4 years ago. And I set up the Street Theatre Company. You can look that up online, freelunch.co.nz. In a way, we commercialised ourselves. The stuff we used to do to annoy people, we now get hired to do as commercial street theatre. And so it scattered. It kind of broke up into pieces. The thing to realise is that the core of it was always here in Hamilton. There was a network, a fairly solid network around the country that did stuff right through all the time, and that's the network that's still in touch with each other. But there was a hell of a lot of fellow travellers, a lot of people who got involved, maybe ran for one election. And I mean, if you look at the Wikipedia page about the McGillicuddy Serious Party, that's really been written by people who weren't very much involved. It's been pulled together by people who were involved for a year or two and disappeared again. Because I mean, as I say, we had 60 candidates in 1990 and 60 in 93, and only about half of those were running for a second time, and another 45 in 96. And we basically took anyone who was prepared to play the game. I mean, we actually had to make a rule after a father and foot, once again involving Winston Peters, this person who was actually mad, who ended up running for us in Christchurch, got drunk and threw beer bottles at him. That might be why he hates us, I don't know. But we made a rule. We actually had to make a rule. We didn't want to have any rules, but we made a rule that you had to be legally sane to run for the McGillicuddies, which was a really hard, we debated that long and hard, because several of the people in the room at the time were not legally sane. But we really needed to sort of protect ourselves from complete loonies. And yeah, you know, we had no reputation to protect. We had some sort of reputation to protect, but we didn't want people throwing bottles at people. So there was definitely a line, and we discovered that it could be crossed. So, as I say, a lot of people had some involvement at some stage or another, but really the core people is probably, I mean, you know, hundreds of people probably over the period of 16 years that the party was going. But probably a core group of probably about 30 or 40 are the people that are really still the carriers of the flame. Still, you know, we have an email loop. We talk to each other all the time. We do things at Te Pāhu all the time. I mean, you know, as a social entity, it's still very, very strong. It just doesn't stick its head above the barricade so often these days. So there you go. There's a potted history.
Hold on, let me readjust the camera before I ask you the next question. All right. So, what do you think that a lot of people in McGillicuddy Serious were doing it because they felt that they didn't have a whole lot of voice under the first past the post system, that they were living in safe seats, or that they really couldn't vote for Labour or National, so if they're going to waste their vote, at least waste it creatively?
I think that was a big motivation, but I don't know if we actually codified it to that degree. I mean, from my perspective, when certainly in the mid-80s, when I was looking around for something to do politically, my first experience, I ran for Mayor of Wellington when I was 19. I ran for political office 8 times in my 20s, you know. It was a bit of a mission. And it was just, the kick that you got out of that was that, you know, once we'd got McGillicuddy established in the public consciousness, and we learnt the ropes of writing media releases and things, you know, you'd be sitting around listening to the radio, and some crazy thing would come out, and we might be sitting around having a spliff or something and go, what about this idea? And we'd write it down and stick it in a fax machine in those days, and the next hour later the radio would come on and it'd be the McGillicuddy say this. And that was enormously satisfying. It was very powerful. And so, I mean, yes, down the track, we became very much aware of the fact that we had created a voice for ourselves. We sometimes got frustrated by its own definitions because, you know, sometimes we were genuinely pissed off and we couldn't say anything unless we were taking the piss. And sometimes we wanted to say serious things, but the rules of the game didn't allow us to. So I'd say that was definitely, I mean, I wouldn't say it was necessarily in our minds that we're sitting in a safe seat and this was a problem with first past the post, because the other thing to remember, in the mid-80s we had no idea that MMP was even coming. You know, we didn't know that, we didn't even, you know, our level of political sophistication was such that if you'd asked us what proportional representation was, we wouldn't have known. I mean, that's the thing, we started from a place that was quite apolitical. The people who were involved were primarily artists and performers and not really activists, and a lot of people were, and even then you've got a lot of people who, for lack of a better term, were sort of nerds that like playing role-playing games, you know, role players, those sort of people. And it was only really when the anarchist people sort of got involved in the early 90s that there was a sense that there was a political overlay to the whole thing, because they came into it because they saw it as a viable and, for them, legitimate vehicle. And I guess, I mean, this is what the Wikipedia page goes on about. There was a degree of tension between the anarchists and, for lack of a better term, the apolitical. But I think it could be overstated, because I think the people that, as I say, the people who've written the Wikipedia page may have felt that was a big factor, but that was more an explanation of the social dynamic that was going on in the group behind the party. And I mean, the anarchists were around a lot in the early 90s, but by the mid-90s there were still some of the key people involved, but most of them had wandered away. People came and went, and the apolitical stuck around just as much as the anarchists did, you know. It tended to be social reasons you stuck around, because it was your friends that were doing it. But I think there was definitely a sense, I mean, in terms of, yeah, I mean, there was nowhere to go. I mean, now, I mean, this is the thing, it wasn't entirely an accident that when the McGillicuddy Serious Party wound up about the same time as the Greens got into Parliament. I mean, certainly for myself, speaking personally, it wasn't until the Greens were in Parliament in their own right, not as part of the alliance, that I felt that I finally had somewhere to go politically. But equally, they'd been around in 1990. The Greens had been around, and at that stage, I'd had no interest in getting involved in them. I guess, I mean, there's a certain degree to which the joke had run its course. We'd had a jolly good time. We'd made our point. As I say, we were going to continue to do McGillicuddy stuff generally. We didn't need the political party to keep doing stuff. And as I say, the work of keeping it going was such that we just stopped. But yeah, it's difficult. I'm loath to make a comparison, because the thing is that if MMP hadn't come in, there's every chance that the political McGillicuddys would have come to a halt anyway. Because although the work to fund ratio around the registration process was a pain, I have a feeling that we had peaked in '93 anyway, and we were on a downward curve no matter what. And the millennium was the logical time to stop. And so if MMP hadn't been there, it's quite possible we would have stopped anyway. I mean, we can definitely say it was a big factor. We know it was a big factor, but it may have happened anyway. Yeah. So I mean, the relationship between our decision to do this in the first place and our decision to stop and MMP is there, but it's an amorphous one. It's not a really solid link. Yeah. But having said that, we were notorious in our time, as you've discovered.
So,
yep.
Well, what are the? I wanted to ask a bit about some of the policies, if only because my production manager, Helen Breeze, I don't know if you know her. No. She actually wants to do a documentary just on the McGillicuddys later on. About time somebody does it.
Yeah, we've had all sorts of people try. Havoc and Newsboy had a go at one stage. In 2020 hassled us about us, because this is the thing at that stage. The other thing is, I mean, probably just if you want some before we get into policy, some socio-economic analysis. Some very specific socio-economic conditions existed to create the circumstances that led to the McGillicuddys, which were that in the 80s there were it was quite a common life path that you'd go to university, and university was cheap. You didn't have to take out a student loan, it didn't cost you much. And so going to university and mucking around was a really common thing. And everybody left home before they turned 20. And so you landed up in flat loads of people, certainly I know I did, and hanging out with each other, doing a bunch of stuff. And then some of you might leave university early and go on the dole, and then you'd meet other people who hadn't gone to university but were mucking around on work schemes and stuff. I mean, that's what the core of the McGillicuddys here met each other on a work scheme, an artistic work scheme. And so those circumstances, that gave rise to I mean, that's why we had time. We were money poor but time rich, and because we had time and because we liked each other's company, we found ways to fill the time, and the McGillicuddys was one of the ways we did that. But after the benefit cuts in the early 90s and the introduction of the student loan scheme, and basically nobody goes to university to muck around anymore. People either drop out, in which case they get involved in kind of activism and get a very truncated kind of dogmatic view of the world, or they get to university and they work their guts out and go off and become yuppies. The sort of middle ground where there was a place where you had a bunch of ideas but they were being freely debated by people that were semi-educated but not completely educated, and who were making their own rules. And it's also worth remembering that this wasn't that long after the whole punk DIY thing had started, where there was this concept of you're actually responsible for your own fun. You don't buy fun, you go out and make it happen. And that was the thing that gave rise to the McGillicuddys generally, and the McGillicuddy Serious Party in particular, far more than anything else. And by the late 90s, you know, we were all having to find jobs. I'd become a solo parent. I mean, you know, the economy, I mean, the thing was that even in Hamilton, you know, it was made possible by the fact the economy had been in the doldrums, and so there were lots of empty buildings. So we had lots of empty buildings. We went, you know, we were able to borrow buildings and do stuff in them. And as soon as the economy recovered, businesses opened in those buildings, and the stuff that was happening around the periphery, the sort of underground culture, got driven out. And so, I mean, basically, the McGillicuddys were children of the recession. And I say, bring back the recession, because until we do that, we're fucked. You know, it's destroying the minds of the young, all this wealth and prosperity. It's really bad for them, you know? So yeah, that's the situation that gave rise for it. I mean, and I say that in retrospect. I mean, I didn't realise this at the time. I'm saying that later, having completed my university education and figured out how the world works and worked out what the fuck was I doing. Well, that's what we were doing. In terms of policy, we wrote a manifesto from the very beginning.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Just want to see if there's any way I can get a slightly wider shot.
We also have to be aware of the time because Graham will be.
Yeah.
We've got to walk 10 minute walk down to where Graham's going to be.
Okay. All right. Good.
In terms of policy, in '87, me and Graham sat down and wrote the first manifesto, and Graham. It was basically Graham wrote it, and I was helping him.
Hold on. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. So policy.
Yeah. Graham was my assistant, sat down in '87 and wrote the first manifesto, and subsequent ones are basically amendments of that first one, usually written by a group of 6 or 7 people each time. And we wrote, and the thing was that was part of the deal. This is all pre-internet, and so we were, as I say, we were trying to do the things that you had to do to be a real party in order to say, partly to outdo the wizard, but also to just play the game. And having a manifesto with a whole bunch of policies was what you did if you were a political party. And Graham's a Luddite. I mean, he really is a Luddite. I mean, he doesn't touch a keyboard. He was basically born about 50 years late. He should have been around in the 1930s because his preference is crank-driven cars and all this sort of stuff. And he's also a monarchist. And a real live monarchist, and I mean, certainly if you look at some of the things that were in that manifesto, they were written as piss takes, and I think that's what attracted people. But I think, particularly for Graham, there's a lot of stuff that he really thinks in there. You could describe him, so we landed up with this odd sort of scenario where Graham, who is relatively socially, I won't go so far as to say he's right-wing, because I don't think he is. I think that he's socialistic in his economic theory, but is probably quite socially conservative, landed up with a political party of people that were all anarchists and quite leftist. And what we landed up with was a weird amalgam. Now the manifesto was posited on the Great Leap Backwards, which was basically the idea of dismantling industrial society and starting again, and trying to keep things like feminism, but go back to, in terms of the good things from modern life, while constructing the good things from the old days, the good old days. And I mean, it was all bullshit. I mean, we made it up as bullshit. I mean, it was always intended to be a piss take and not taken seriously, while at the same time making some points about the way society worked. But I also have to come back to my point before. The manifesto, I mean, even after the first couple of times, the core of us we used the manifesto as our guiding, as to what we were doing. And then after that, we tended to use it as a manual for getting new people involved, and then we went off and did other things. I mean, in '92, I ran for mayor of Hamilton as a mafia don, as Don Serviano, who was running on a ticket of criminalising everything, wanting to take a cut off everything. And the whole theatre was based around wearing suits and being threatening and all the theatre of power. At one time or another, we've had in the Hamilton mayoralty, we had a black box run as a candidate. We had a bag lady run as a candidate. We had a transvestite run as a candidate.
Well, one finally got in.
Well, an actual transvestite. We just did it as a joke, And I mean, the point was that, I mean, that's the thing. When I ran as Don Serviano, I was advocating the building of a casino as a joke. Well, they built a casino a few years later. So some of the things we were saying as jokes came to pass. So I guess what I'm saying is that the manifesto, we always put it out there so that we had a manifesto and people could look somewhere. And the thing that freaked people out was the manifesto was wacky and way out, but it had its own internal consistency. And there is a copy online of the last one, the '99 one, which has got a link on the Wikipedia page to give you an idea. But at the same time, I have to emphasise that after the first couple of times, we really pushed the idea that all our candidates should come up with new stuff and come up with new stories and new policies. I mean, the bitch goddess of Hamilton East, who ran in Hamilton East in '93, her policy was to sort all the men into 2 groups. Half of them would have their dicks chopped off and they'd be used for and they would do all the lifting, and half of them had their limbs chopped off and they'd do all the breeding. I mean, that wasn't in the manifesto, but it was the policy for Hamilton East, and that was the thing. Policy came from all over the place, and if someone had a crazy idea and could hold it together as a coherent set of ideas, we said go for it, And so the manifesto probably only represents the Great Leap Backwards, which is the thing we're most known for, probably only represents probably about 50% of the total ideas that were generated by that group of people over those years. Yeah, a lot of crazy shit came up with, you know, all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
One of Helen's favorite policies is carpeting the roads in order to decrease wear on tires and fix unemployment.
Well, you see, there's the thing. I've never heard that policy before. People came up with stuff and put it out there, and some of it remembered and some of it doesn't. And some, I mean, on the Wikipedia page, there's stuff. That's a classic example of we put the ideas out there. This is the framework for making crazy ideas, and people came up with ideas under that framework. But you know, that wasn't in the manifesto. Who knows? I don't know where that one came from.
So tell me, as I said, everybody now seems to remember you fondly, with the exception of New Zealand First. Now let's forget New Zealand First for right now.
That's good. They didn't like us at the time.
Well, could you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, because we were taking the piss out of everyone. And I mean, I'd like to think that the McGillicuddys did have a permanent effect, because I do think that New Zealand politicians don't take themselves quite so seriously now. Ironically enough, given there's nothing like the McGillicuddys around doing the job that we were doing. It's also worth remembering that they remember us, and they tend to forget not only that the Wizard did it first, and that in the late 80s we were one of half a dozen zany parties. There was the Auckland Revolutionary Army, there was the Honkus Piaki, not Honkus Piaki, he was one of ours, the Erastus Ogilvy Party. I mean, parody parties were quite common in the late 80s, and probably for those socio-economic reasons I was describing before, and we just were the ones who put a lot more effort into it and got it up to another level. That was why we were so obsessed with doing the things that you had to do. We absorbed some of those parties. I mean, we absorbed the Auckland Revolutionary Army. We absorbed what was that outfit in? I'm trying to remember that. I mean, there was a bunch of others. There was Vince Bamboo Torini in Auckland, who'd been running as a solo zany candidate in Auckland Central since the early 70s. He was in his 70s when he's dead now, but we observed his party. He had the Bamboo Party, and we absorbed him. He chucked it in and threw his lot in with us after the first time we'd got a lot of candidates, and that tended to be what happened. A bunch of people that had been doing it on their own sort of came under our umbrella. What was the question again? I don't know. I've probably gone off topic here.
How, at the time, how did
they feel about it?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't. Some people, we tended to be loved by the audience. When we went to meet the candidates meetings, we tended to be loved by the audience and hated by the other candidates. Some candidates figured out very quickly that the best way to deal with us was to be friendly and not to attack us, because we would always have the last laugh, because we were quicker witted than them. I mean, we did things like, I mean, the one that I remember, once again, coming back to when I ran as Don Serviano, as a mafia Don, the very first time that we went to a meeting, and we always arrived, because Don Serviano was always at the Theatre of Power, and we were all in suits and dark shades and everything, and we always arrived late, and all my bodyguards would spread out and take it up, and they knew it was us, because they'd seen us do stuff before, they'd recognised us, but this time, whereas previously we were wearing kilts, this time we were wearing suits, and we're never quite sure what the fuck are they doing this time. This is 92, we'd already been around in Hamilton for, 15, well, we'd already been running for mayor for 10 years at that point. And we predicted successfully something that was going to happen at that very first meeting. I was sitting there puffing on a cigar, which was hard work because I don't smoke tobacco. And somebody said, "Would you put that cigar out, please?" And I clicked my fingers, and one of my bodyguards came over, put his hand out, and I stuffed the cigar out in his hand. Now, he'd prepared for that. He had a 50-cent piece in his hand so that he could stuff it out safely. But the point was, that completely established the ground rules as far as we are the powerful people here. The irony is that all the other candidates are trying to make out that they're just like you. They're just like you. I'm just like, I'm especially at the local body, the mayoralty level. It's like, I'm just somebody. I'm somebody just like you, and I'm just running for public office. Whereas we were going, we're in charge. We are the powerful people here. And so what happened was that after that meeting, we'd always arrive late. We had a whole lot. We had attempted assassinations and and scandals involving babies and all kinds of stuff in that campaign. It was pretty much the best campaign we ever did. But what consistently happened from that point onwards was that people, all the other candidates would go, ladies, gentlemen, Don Silviano. They would always acknowledge Don Silviano as the power in the room, because they couldn't not, because we were playing, because we'd set the rules. We were playing the game, and if you didn't play the game with us, we were gonna do you, because the odd person that did try to cross us when we were in character never had a chance. In the same way that when you see a busker or a clown, you don't have a chance against a clown or a busker, because they've always got the upper hand, because they've got more conceptual room for manoeuvre than you have. And so candidates, the smart ones, tended to, especially as the years went on, they tended to sort of try and get us on side and play along with us. And but as I say, I mean, Winston Peters probably hates us because of the candidate's new kilt, which we did when he went to announce that he had quit the National Party and was going to run as a candidate. We turned up our candidate turned up with I was there that day, and it's like the Emperor's New Clothes, but with a kilt. So he had a sporran covering his gonads, but other than that, he was completely naked in the lower half of his body. And we paraded in the middle of Tauranga in front of probably, I don't know, several hundred people over 70. Amazingly, none of them died of heart attacks. But I mean, that was the sort of shit we were doing. It was pretty blunt. It was pretty to the point. You know, we were making a point about Winston and the way he does things, and it was a pretty good laugh, actually. You know, in the end, we were mainly amusing ourselves. I mean, that was the test. We weren't doing it for anyone else. We were doing it for our own amusement. You know, so if we could get away with it. I got a quote recently that made sense, explained half my life to me. Genesis P. Orridge from a band called Throbbing Gristle, who are an industrial outfit in Britain in the 80s. He said, crime is naive performance art. And I understand that completely, because the intention of good performance art is, I reckon, should always be to confront and leave people feeling uncomfortable. I mean, that's not to say I'm advocating crime, but it does mean that it made me understand it, because the psychological effect, in some ways, the degree of alienation and the bloody-minded attitude of a good performance artist is not entirely similar to that of a good criminal, essentially. And we broke the rules, you know. We put bogus people on the electoral roll and voted as them. We got someone who was 16 to run for Parliament when they weren't old enough. You know, we did all kinds of naughty stuff, mainly just to play the game. Stuff, as I say, stuff that the public never found out about.
Oh, why not tell all right now?
Why not tell all right now? Well, there you go. Those are a couple of small things. But I don't know, what else is there to tell you? I mean, that's the basic framework. I mean, I'd have to, I don't know. Graham can probably tell you some more. I mean, it's sort of hard. I mean, in terms of the philosophy. I mean, to me, the philosophy of life that I adopted when I got involved in McGillicuddy's when I was very young is still the thing that drives me. I mean, actually, I'll tell you what. Here's another thing. When we registered for MMP, one of the things we had to do, apart from sign people up and get money off them, which we had never done before, was have a constitution. We hadn't done that yet before either, because we never had any paperwork. In fact, and as I say, we had a rule that there should be no rules. And we had to write up this thing. It was kind of in order to demonstrate what we were doing. And we called it a mission anti-statement. And which was, also had did funny things with punctuation as well. And but in that document, and that was a document that was lodged with the Electoral Commission as our constitutional document. And in it, it specifically says, if you know, the Electoral Commission, you went and asked the Electoral Commission to pull it out of their archives, there it would be. It says that if we do not succeed in getting into power by running for Parliament before the turn of the century, I may not have mentioned the turn of the century, we will infiltrate whatever other organisation we need to infiltrate to get the same outcome. And on that basis, and it's registered, and on that basis I always felt justified joining the Greens, because I was infiltrating, and it was, and all the Greens know that I'm infiltrating. I never make any qualms about the fact that I'm infiltrating. You know, I mean, that's the mission I'm on, is infiltration. The fact that I'm now running the whole bloody thing is just a very good piece of infiltration. You know? And so, yeah, I mean, there's a classic example of a gag that we built into the things we did, which never got up onto the public level, because there was always, because as I say, because we were trying to amuse ourselves, so we always had multiple layers of stuff to keep ourselves amused, because the stuff that amused the public was pretty facile, really. We still did it. And we may need to make a move, because we're going to meet Graham in 5 minutes.
Well, that's wonderful, because I'm out of tape.
Ooh.
Really stand in front of it in order to get the sound.
So if I walk around here and talk to you about this. This is Riff Raff. Riff Raff was an idea I had in 2000. It took me 4 years to get him put up. He's made by Weta Workshop. He was the first piece of public art they ever did. And the website address down there is for the website that I maintain that tells you the story. He was quite controversial, similar to the McGillicuddys really. He got up all the right people's noses because a whole lot of people really didn't want a man in fishnets on a pedestal on the main street, funnily enough, which was great because that's exactly the reaction I was looking for. Because I didn't do this because I like Rocky Horror. I mean, I quite like Rocky Horror, but I'm not a tranny. I did this mainly because this struck me as a piece of alternative history that would really stuff up the city's psychology, and so it has turned out to be.
Okay, let me just get a couple more shots. Actually, if I could get you in front of it for a couple of...
This is my baby. My darling. My pride and joy.
Oh.
Ironically, it's also the thing...
Sorry.
Ironically as well, because Graham was always the front man for the McGillicuddys, I'm probably better known in Hamilton for this than for the McGillicuddys. Simply because this was such a major stunt and it was my baby in particular, whereas Graham always sat out the front with the McGillicuddy stuff. But yep, proof that it's always possible to... I'm always interested in any scenario that is semi-official, a bit like a political party, semi-official, plays the games, ticks off all the boxes, all the grown-ups say it's okay, but in some way it's still very naughty. That's what it amuses me, because anyone can do random stuff. It's getting away with things from inside the system that's the interesting part of the game.
Actually, could I get that phrase, everything about the theater, and ironically, for less than it cost to build the statue?
Yeah, ironically enough, the story
Wait. So yeah.
Ironically enough, they knocked it down in 1993 when it would have only cost them about 150 grand to buy it.
They knocked the theater down? You got to say...
Sorry, in 1993 they knocked the Embassy Theatre down. It had been a beautiful old theatre. It was built in about 1913. It had had a horrible frontage put on it in the 50s, which made people not appreciate it. It had been Edwardian. They put a horrible modern frontage, and so even by the time Richard O'Brien was going into it in the late 50s, early 60s, it was viewed as a flea pit. And certainly when I moved to Hamilton in the late 80s, it was viewed as just a total write-off. But it was actually a theatre with a great big backstage and dropping scenes and everything. And in the end, they knocked it down in 93 because they didn't know what else to do with it. I mean, this park is here as an accident. They didn't intend to put the park here. They were intending to build something else. But then in 2000, when it was still a gap, and I'd seen something on TV of Richard O'Brien saying that was the spot where he thought of Rocky Horror, I thought that we needed a statue. Ironically, the statue cost more than it would have cost to save the building. It could have been in the foyer. But there you go. Not necessarily interested in statues per se. They're just a sort of a more solid version of street theatre. And I'm only interested in things that cause trouble. G'day. Doesn't happen every day you get someone coming. Right, you're going to use up a lot of tape just walking down the road now. If I think of anything, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Because we've got...
Hello, I'm Brian Boyko.
How you doing?
Yeah, Hamilton.
Hey.
Good day.
Do you dress like that every day?
Not every day. Sometimes I wear my kilt on the inside.
Ah. So thank you for coming out and
okay.
helping me out.
I've got to go back and rescue his tripod.
Yeah, I forgot it in the rush over here.
Sure.
You're taking the St. Peter's.
St. Peter's or Garden Place, I don't really care, seeing as I'm halfway there.
Okay, well,
But I do only have 20 minutes though.
Well, in that case, if you come up there, you should go to St. Peter's because you have more time then.
That's true.
Yeah. Okay,
Sure.
I'll meet you back there. Go to St. Peter's, I'll go and rescue your tripod.
Okay. So you're from where?
Texas, Austin, Texas.
Okay, and what's your interest in MMP?
Well, we don't have it. We don't have anything like it.
There's lots of things you don't have, like a king and queen, though.
Yeah, but you know.
No, I don't mean to be facetious. I'm surprised that the concepts even has any currency there.
Oh, it doesn't have any currency. That's why I'm doing the documentary.
Oh, okay. Because I heard Canada was having a brief fluttering with it.
In Ontario, yeah, but
Yeah.
no.
Okay.
That actually didn't even pass. So.
Right. Lucky for them, in my opinion.
Really, you're not a supporter of MMP?
No, I campaigned long and hard against it when it was being offered to us. Of course, I failed. Yeah. So how long have you been in New Zealand?
About a month, and I leave tomorrow.
Oh, really? A
And
month?
This was actually the absolute last day.
Oh,
And I'm sorry for getting you on such short notice.
no,
but
that's fine. I'm sorry for not being able to give you more time, but at 4 p.m. I do have to go and prepare for another performance. And that only came in yesterday as well, so actually this morning, so it's all your standard pre-Christmas madness. Well, your non-standard pre-Christmas madness. So I just thought this might be an interesting backdrop because it's easier to park here. It's just this old, this was not even that old, but it looks older than it is. Church, which I used once as a backdrop for a campaign that I did against the leader of the New Zealand First Party.
yeah, that does remind me. That's some of the things I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Basically, though, I suppose my first question, and I should get this. How did MMP impact the McGillicuddy Serious?
It destroyed us.
Really?
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Because prior to MMP, there were only a few political parties of any note. Really, only 5, among four others and us. And there are a few odd little, totally loony parties. You know, the really fringe element parties. And that's because forming a political party was sort of, I guess, a mysterious thing. It was like forming a religion, you know, having visions, or, you know, was conducting your own court case. It was one of those things that most people didn't do. They wouldn't dream of doing it. And then when MMP came in, part and parcel of that was the laws governing what was and was not a political party were laid down for the first time. And it was just, you know, you needed 500 people who'd signed a form, and so that many members, and you needed some rules and some constitution, and you know, about an A4 page full of things you had to fulfill. And suddenly every man and his dog went, oh, was that all it is? So it went from 5 parties to 27 parties, a proliferation of really insane little parties of one bloke and his mate who thought they knew what was best for the country. And those parties were so daft and so absurd, and so they were, I mean, genuinely silly parties. So the official silly party, the McGillicuddy Serious Party, was no longer needed by the media to hold an unflattering mirror up to the New Zealand political system and New Zealand Parliament and New Zealand MPs. And it was then that I realised, oh, that's the only reason why we'd had any access to the media, not because their ideas are fantastic, but because we were useful from time to time to cast an unfavourable light on other politicians. And we were no longer necessary because the genuinely loony parties were so loony, and the backbiting and the silly arguments between them was so intense and so bizarre that we didn't get a look in anymore. And so our profile just plummeted dramatically after MMP came in. And so everybody was saying, oh, MMP's going to be great for you, McGillicuddy's, you might even get somebody in Parliament. But I knew they had this arbitrary, unnecessarily high 5% threshold, which was 6 MPs You know, so you either had no MPs or 6 extra list MPs. I mean, not one. I mean, you could one MP. You know, a person can hold their own opinions. You can't have half an MP, obviously. How, you know, that's insane. But one MP could sit in Parliament. You know, but they had this high bar that I knew we wouldn't be able to leap, and most of those other silly little parties that turned up couldn't leap either. And so it turned out to be of no use to us whatsoever. And 2 elections later, we were gone.
There are a couple of theories out there. One of them is that with MMP, there are fewer people that felt that they had less to lose by voting for a silly party, say people in safe seats, not marginal seats, or people who were just disgusted with having to choose either National or Labour. Do you think that the increase in the number of choices under MMP decreased support for McGillicuddy?
I don't think our vote went down particularly, because we'd never had many people voting for us anyway. I mean, we'd always said, okay, if you want to have a protest vote for us. If you oppose Parliament completely and you want to end democracy, vote for us, and we'll sack all MPs, including ourselves. So there were 1,000 different ways. If you want to put the wind up the ruling politicians by voting for something that sounds insane, vote for us. If you want to have an amusing time and be able to chat to your friends, I voted McGillicuddy, as people still shout on the street today. Oh, I'm voting for you this time. Of course, we haven't been around for a long, long time as a political party. Then vote for us. And in spite of that, even when we're most popular, very few people voted for us. But that didn't matter, you know. I mean, we're still having great fun. We had great fun doing it, and we still, by being an official political party and getting access to the media during election time and having a profile that enabled us to get in the newspapers and get on television, get on the radio, we still had access to the hearts and minds of the country, more so than we would have if we just been standing around doing street theatre or orating from a soapbox. We didn't lose any votes because we didn't really have any votes to start off with. Yeah, so it didn't affect us in that respect, I don't think.
So,
I mean, we never came even vaguely close under first past the post or under MMP to having a member in Parliament. One of our candidates once came second in a mayoral election, and that was it. Yeah, that's as good as we ever did.
So, what about, you said that you campaigned against MMP?
I did, quite vociferously. In fact, in 1993, pretty much everything I said on television and the papers was aimed at trying to pull the wool from people, New Zealanders' eyes, on this subject. And this, if I can recollect, the mood at the time in 1993 was many New Zealanders were very irritated at the shenanigans of Parliament, and they really wanted they wanted parliamentary reform. They were sick of all the childishness, the backbiting, the duplicity. I mean, New Zealand doesn't have that all by itself, obviously, but it had become particularly irritating, and for the first time ever, politicians were at the bottom of the heap in terms of public profile. They're down there with used car salesmen, and so that was an all-time low in the esteem that New Zealanders had for politicians, and they really wanted parliamentary reform. And under the guise of that, they were hoodwinked into accepting electoral reform. And I figured that nothing was going to improve. In fact, it was going to get worse, because fiddling around with the ways in which politicians got into power wasn't going to affect anything of significance. In fact, we're going to go from 99 of these annoying bastards to 120 of them. You know, how are we even better off? You know, it's analogous to say, some concerned children saying to their parents, "Mummy and Daddy, please stop arguing so badly," and the parents going, "Okay, sure, we'll divorce." Because oh no, that's not what we meant. And that's what happened in New Zealand. So we got MMP, and it just got worse and worse and worse, in my opinion. Okay. And I could see that coming, but there weren't many people who campaigned against it. Obviously, the two main parties, they had a very strong lobby to oppose it, because they thought, in my opinion, erroneously, that it was going to break their stranglehold on power. And they're just Tweedledum, Tweedledee parties. They're effectively the same, apart from their branding. And so nothing really has changed, except we now have more MPs.
So, a lot of people, as Mark was telling me, a lot of people didn't like you at the time, but when I went around interviewing people, thanks Mark, when I went around interviewing people, they all seem to remember you fondly now that they don't have to run against you.
Well, that could be right. Some people were very, very irritated. But we brought a lot of colour to the meetings, and I think if it wasn't for us, considerably fewer people would have turned up to listen to to the ruling politicians incredibly tedious monologues about this and that. And of course everyone remembers us fondly because we were jolly, quite jolly. We still are quite jolly, and they hated us at the time because we said things that you can't normally say. So we were the modern equivalent, in my opinion, to the old court jester. So under the guise of stupidity, we were able to say some very cutting, very accurate, and viciously funny things. And those barbs hurt, but now those wounds have healed, and of course everybody loves us. With nostalgia is like that, isn't it?
Well, there was, of all the people we interviewed, there was only one person that I interviewed that did not remember you fondly and said that he never really cared for you, and that was Winston Peters. Could you tell me a little bit about the McGillicuddys and Winston Peters?
Well, I don't know a great deal about the man. I have seen him laughing his head off at a meeting whereby I'd ascertained why it was that people voted for Winston Peters, and it doesn't make sense at all that he should be so popular. And I figured that he gets such a strong regular vote, mostly amongst elderly people, because the men want a strong leader, and the women want somebody handsome to dream about at night. So I turned up trying to be stronger and more handsome than him, and I patterned myself off the way Mel Gibson played William Wallace in the film Braveheart. So I turned up in that costume, acting like that, and mostly my speech was just saying, I'm better looking, and I'm a tougher bastard than this other dull person in the three-piece pinstripe suit. And I do recollect him laughing his head off at some of the things I was saying at an election meeting in Tauranga. But we were quite irritating, and we weren't polite to him at all. So we'd booked a public speech in Tauranga, his home, the town that his electorate's centred in. And we'd been booked in for ages, and he happened to also turn up and with all his cronies and and his band and sound system and all the expensive stuff and the tiers of seats for all his blue rinse loyal devotees who sit there and adulate him as if he was some kind of guru. And I think that's the sort of power he has over people. It's a sort of religious mania that people have for him. And we turned up to do our scheduled event. We'd booked it in with the City Council, told the newspapers everything was organised, and we were doing a parody of the Emperor's New Clothes show. So we were unveiling a candidate who had the candidate's new kilt, and obviously had no kilt on, but he did have a sporran and he had a big long white shirt, so you couldn't really see anything too lewd. And we proceeded to do this performance that was scheduled, and he took great umbrage at it. And some of his devotees, these respectable, polite, middle-aged, upper-middle-class women, went berserk, and one attacked me with a handbag, bashed my hat off, and she was raving. And up until that point, I'd never known what the expression "to be beside yourself" really meant. And she was completely beside herself. It was somebody else speaking through her mouth. It was most bizarre, most bizarre. And so, effectively, he considers that we ruined that event. It was our event. He just muscled in on it with all his expensive truckloads of stuff. And I also demonstrated our housing policy in front of him in Hamilton, which was making low-cost housing out of mud, water, and ripped-up books. And I laid a sort of a turd-coloured, turd-shaped mud brick as a demonstration. And he just happened to be in Garden Place, which is my turf. That's my turf. I'm the leader of Hamilton. That's my zone. And he happened to be on my turf, so I just carried on doing what I was doing, and that bothered him a lot as well. But and I challenged him to a porridge wrestle because there was a by-election going on, and he and I were the only candidates, and the whole country was up in arms about the fact that they considered that our candidate, wasn't me actually, our candidate was wasting $69,000 of taxpayers' money, which is I think what it was going to cost to run. And each time it was broadcast, the price went up and up and up. And I said, well, that's we don't mean to waste your money. I mean, we're not the ones who stood down from our seat in Parliament and caused the by-election. But if there's going to be a by-election, then we're a political party. Obviously we're going to contest it. We'd be mad not to. What is this gentleman's agreement behind closed doors that everyone else is not going to contest it? So we were contesting it. I said, well, we could settle it quite easily. I don't really mind. It wouldn't cost a cent. The leader of both parties, that's me and Winston Peters, will have a porridge wrestle. So that's a little kid's paddling pool full of porridge, and he can wear his pinstripe briefs, and I'll wear my tartan and paisley undersporran, to preserve modesty, and the winner takes all. And and he wimped out of that one quite sneakily, quite snake-like kind of manner. So maybe that's still irritating him as well, that we were so funny and he wasn't very funny at all.
Okay.
He won, of course. He won. We didn't win. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So.
But I got nothing against Winston Peters. I mean, he's just doing his job. He's a politician. They're duplicitous, two-faced creeps.
So what happened? Why did the McGillicuddys eventually, at least the party, not the
Oh,
actual,
yes.
you know, why did you guys eventually close down?
Well, it came to 99, and it was December 1999, and we'd been long anticipating great catastrophe at the millennium change. And you know, apart from the fact that the millennium didn't change then, but you know, that's all right. In consensus opinion said that it did. And when 999 changed to 1000, all manner of loony cults turned up, and you know, religious cults and crackpots, and a lot of people were sucked in really badly. So we rebranded ourselves as a dangerous millennial cult, and we prophesied that the person who had been wanting to crown as King of New Zealand once we dissolved Parliament, a guy called Bonnie Prince Jeffy, we prophesied that Messiah-like he was going to suddenly eventuate, because he's been in hiding for a long time, in fact wishing that we would just go away and stop doing this, because he doesn't want to be King of New Zealand at all. He wants to lead a quiet life, and good on him. Who can blame him, really? I mean, anyone who wants to rule can't be trusted. So he's referred to as Bonnie Prince Jeffy the Reluctant, you know, like Vlad the Impaler and Alexander the Great. He's Jeffy the Reluctant. So we were imagining that he was going to suddenly, if the scene was set correctly, we've got enough New Zealanders hoping and praying that he would turn up, wishing for him to arrive and stop New Zealand on the brink of the millennium. So all the Y2K nonsense, all that stuff, which had a lot of currency then, you know, that was a really strong belief in people's opinions. And many people have prophesied the 21st century is going to be a period of great cultural decline and a time of a terrible time. So and we'd always had this policy called the Great Leap Backwards. And so we said, okay, so that's the cut-off point. If we can stop New Zealand before the end of 1999 and head back into a well-organised, clan-based, medieval subsistence type past, based on the ideology of funism, where more people than anybody else, more people than any other doctrine are able to enjoy themselves, then that'll work really well. We can do that. But as it turns out, the people didn't vote for him or us, and consequently he didn't turn up, and our massive revolution came to nothing. And so because we'd all been promising that this was going to happen, because it didn't transpire, unlike most politicians and religious leaders whose prophecies and promises don't come true, we apologised as profoundly and as sincerely as we could. We heaped scorn on ourselves, and we resigned en masse on that day. December, was it 5th, Mark, or 4th? 4th or the 5th of December, all over New Zealand. I met people who went, "Oh, McGillicuddy's, yeah. I went to your wind-up party. Oh, yeah. It was in Motueka." "Oh, really?" I mean, so it happened simultaneously all over the place. I was only aware of the Hamilton one, because that's the one I was working on. So simultaneously the party just dissolved, and we heaped scorn on ourselves, public humiliation. I put myself in the stocks, and people poured treacle, and it looked like taras. And I was tarred and feathered effectively, and I whipped myself, and I put on sackcloth and ashes, and people threw rotten fruit at me. And I put a big sign around my neck that said "liar." And since then, we've never gone into politics in the McGillicuddy Serious Party, and we won't, I hope, ever again. Other people tried to start up the party under our name, but it's our brand, and we're controlling it quite vigorously. And I hope that the Irish clan, whose name is spelt the same as ours, Clan McGillicuddy, I hope they do the same, because we're in this together. It's our brand.
McGillicuddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got it wrong.
Yeah, luckily for us. We're on good terms with them. We sent an envoy to their international clan gathering about 12 years ago. He was very well received. Turned up in his kilt and everything. They're Irish, of course. They don't wear kilts anymore, although of course the Irish used to. And he was given the official royal tour by the chief of that clan, and treated as a most important international guest, which of course he was. None of them have come to our clan gatherings as yet, but you know.
Mind you, the other factor is that the people whose real name is McGillicuddy, one day New Zealand Post did you can send a letter anywhere for free today promotion. So we tracked down all the people whose real name was McGillicuddy in New Zealand, and there was a couple of dozen of them.
Mostly in Masterton and
mostly in Masterton and Wairarapa, yeah. And sent them a letter inviting them to join the McGillicuddy Serious Party. And then just recently, that was years ago, and then just recently somebody whose real name is McGillicuddy, running in for local body election in Masterton, Council of Masterton, put up a sign saying, billboards saying a serious vote. Vote for McGillicuddy, because that's his real Ron McGillicuddy or something.
For a serious vote.
Yep.
I don't know how well he did.
Yeah. So
but good on him.
He got back at us quite
successfully
on that one.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. So it's sort of one each so far. And the contest goes on.
I know that the time's very limited. Let me just get like the whole, you know.
Okay. Just come out to 4.
Yeah, I realise that.
Sorry.
Good enough?
Yeah, I think so. Between the two of you, I think I have enough, unless there's anything you guys wanted to add.
You're also listing that.
Ah, thank you.
And there's that.
All right.
I can't think of anything. I did all the history stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
I did. I was actually